as I've said many times, I very, very, very seldom ask for a song, a specific song, but I did ask for that one. Do I have the courage to change? Have I the courage to change? I think another question to ask is, do I have the courage to have the conversations I need to have in order to change? See, I believe it's through conversations that real change occurs in our lives. So today, I would like to recruit all of you into the ministry. I'm not relinquishing my job, no, I'm not. But I would like for each of you to become a part of the ministerial team of this whole world. As we conclude our May theme, which is compassion, I want to talk about having compassionate and courageous conversations. If there is one thing that people around you need, it is compassionate conversations. We all do. We all do. There's so much going on in our lives at any given time. We just need to be able to express ourselves and to be heard. We just need someone to listen and be gentle with our emotions and our thoughts, and we just need to be able to have a meaningful and courageous conversation. So I want to talk about three elements of this. I want to talk about, one, what is a meaningful and courageous conversation, a compassionate conversation? Number two, when are we asked to have them? What situations arise that require them? And three, what is possible spiritually for us if we're willing to do it? So I was researching a little bit about meaningful and compassionate conversations, and they really have two crucial elements as a part of them. Crucial elements of listening. The first is that each person in the conversation is listening to understand. You know, most of us tend to listen only as much as needed as required to figure out what we're going to say next. What's our reply going to be? Yeah, they're talking, but I got to make sure I make my point in the next sentence, right? But when we listen to understand the person who is speaking, suddenly this meaningful space opens up between the two people talking, and powerful words can be processed in that opening. And listening with understanding means that you have something that some of us are very challenged in finding, and that is curiosity. Curiosity. Listening with an understanding heart means that you have curiosity, and as we listen, we must care about what the other person thinks and believes as they are sharing. We must hear what they're sharing, but also be curious as to what's behind that. What's behind what they're saying? What's behind what's being spoken? We've got to ask further questions to help the person speaking express themselves more fully. Because see, if we think we've already figured everything out about that person or about the topic at hand, we have a hard time showing up as curious. One of my favorite phrases during a conversation is, tell me more. Tell me more. I find it a beautiful way to actually say, I love you. Tell me more. I'm interested in knowing more about your point of view or your experience of the thing or how you came up with these ideas. Tell me more. I'm curious to know your take on the subject at a deeper level. Tell me more. I care about you and I want to understand you. Tell me more. Please express yourself completely so that I can know you even better. Tell me more. I want to create a space for your feelings and deeper exploration of this. Tell me more. So the first element of a meaningful conversation is listening to the other person. And the second element of a meaningful conversation and a courageous conversation is extending that practice of listening to yourself. To yourself. In order to have a conversation that has a powerful impact on both of you, each person must also be examining their own perceptions and opinions and beliefs as a result of the conversation that's happening. So this second element of turning your listening ear to your own inner world is about using the conversation as a way to understand the basis of your own beliefs. Tell yourself more. We need conversation with other people so that we might hear ourselves and our own inner dialogue. See, when we just simply think things over and over to ourselves, and we all do that, we generally replay the same thoughts over and over and over. We do not hear what we are saying to ourselves. And sometimes one person just taking the lead and being willing to be the curious one will serve as a model for the other person. And comments like, tell me more, or can you share just a little bit more about that, will encourage the other person to open up and to begin that healing and hearing process, because they can hear what they are saying as well as what you're saying. This inner and outer listening and speaking is powerful practice. And the reason I call these conversations courageous is because they require courage. Have I the courage to actually have this conversation? Most of us keep ourselves pretty safe in conversations. We tend to draw to ourselves people and friends and coworkers and just people in general who we assume feel approximately the same way we do about most major things. We tend to gravitate towards those people and neighbors who agree with us on most things, rather than challenge us to have a new thought. You know, we really do generally replay the same topics over and over and over again, the same opinions, the same safe subjects, without showing up with a lot of courage. We don't invite vulnerability from other people, and we don't allow ourselves that vulnerability to show. But if we can create opportunities in our lives to have meaningful conversations where we're not only listening to other people, but we're listening to ourselves and examining our own beliefs, we can actually probe some of the most complex subjects and issues of our world and in our experiences. We can actually grow and release thoughts and beliefs that are outdated and no longer serve us. And meaningful conversations take time, don't they? Take a lot of time. You know, it's hard to have this courageous conversation in the middle of a neighborhood cookout, you know, with there's so many distractions and things going on. But we hate to get into a big subject because we realize that exploring our own beliefs and thoughts takes a lot of time, much less creating the space to listen to somebody else. Better not open that can of worms today. I don't have time for that. But meaningful and courageous conversations are what most of us are craving. Americans spend millions and millions of dollars every year paying people to listen to us because we don't have structures in our own life where we can be heard, where we can have these kinds of conversations in our daily life. We have to go create that kind of a situation for ourselves. Meaningful conversations are actually the doorway that led me into the ministry. You know, I was in my corporate career, flying all over the country, helping leaders be better leaders and doing all that stuff. And I wasn't quite fulfilled. I wasn't there. I just wasn't feeling fulfilled. Bill and I were talking about that before service, about this urge inside to be fulfilled. So I started asking God to give me opportunities. I started opening myself up to having conversations, and I called them meaningful, fulfilling conversations. So as I would go about the country, they would put me in some conference room or some temporary office to do my work, and day after day people would come in, and we would do the work we were supposed to do, but pretty soon that conversation would evolve into talking about their lives outside of work. And we would dive in, and I would listen and ask questions about things that we typically wouldn't talk about. But I was fulfilling my desire to minister, and my work became my ministry. Because whatever you're doing in life, you can take the opportunity to have these courageous conversations. So now that we know what they are, when are we called to have them? If we really pay attention, we can be called to have a conversation like this on a regular basis, no matter what we do in life. Think about some of the issues that are happening in the world right now, or in our own personal experiences. Think about it. If we're going to be compassionate and effective spiritual beings moving about our lives in our communities, we're willing to show up and have healing conversations, we should probably be willing to look at our own beliefs and thoughts about a lot of issues, a lot of topics, these hot issues that come up from time to time. You know what they are. Gun violence, Black Lives Matter, abortion, right now that one's a big one, LGBTQ rights, Me Too movement, and innumerable political issues. What do we think about those things? What do we believe about them? These subjects are going to pop into our conversation, and we're either going to have these conversations, or we're going to do what we usually do, and that is turn away. Sometimes we turn away because we haven't figured out our own stuff. We haven't figured out our own thoughts and beliefs and feelings about these kind of big subjects. And sometimes we turn away because we don't know how to handle a conversation with someone who thinks or believes differently than we do. So we just shut it all down. Sometimes we make rules going into settings, like no conversations about anything real, y'all. We're just going to be fluffy today. Sometimes we view the conversation as a competition or a debate, instead of an opportunity to explore another's point of view or our own point of view. And all that is required of us is to show up and listen. And of course, we got to share authentically from our perspective too. But these kinds of meaningful and courageous conversations require that we step out of either or thinking. We've got to get out of black and white thinking. We've got to suspend any idea that there's only one way to view a subject. This can be true and this can be true. My perspective is valid and your perspective is valid. We aren't trying to solve this issue in this conversation right here. We're simply trying to explore our own beliefs and our thoughts and examine them and feel what they are in relationship to someone else's. We're trying to step into the truth of oneness. We're all one. And we come to that with this spirit of peacefulness. So let's talk about peace for a second, because these types of conversations require peace. What do I mean by peace? Let's say peace is like this agreement that water and rocks have in a stream. They have this mutual pattern of expression. They flow together. They move, and then they are totally still. And yet both are changed by the relationship with each other in this non-resistant agreement of peace. The water gets to move forward and be energized by the journey, by the rock, and yet the water is also able to be still. And the rock gets to be the guide for the journey and to slowly and peacefully allow the water to change it, to kind of round off its sharp edges. That's peace. So if you find yourself in a meaningful and courageous conversation with someone opposing your point of view, and they're unwilling to look at things differently, bring to mind this image of the stream. Whether you see yourself as the rock or the water, just be non-resistant. Be energized by the conversation, changed by it, not diminished by it. I think we avoid being courageous because we don't see how do we get to the other side of it. How do we get to the other side of this moment intact? And perhaps that stream analogy can help you in that moment. Another situation that calls us into meaningful conversation is when someone is in a transitional moment in their life. There's this universal pattern that plays out over and over in all of our experiences, and it happens to all of us. So perhaps you'll understand it when I talk about it. So there's this natural ebb and flow to life. We experience a time in our lives where we build and we create form and structures around our circumstances. We spend this time when we build jobs and we build friendships and relationships and neighbors and stabilizing situations all around us. And then we slowly find ourselves in a different period of time where we're just existing in our structures. We're just existing and thriving in the situations that we have created. We're kind of coasting as we thrive. And then, and it happens to everyone, one or more of those structures begins to make its transition, as all form and structures do. Make their transition, and then we realize change is upon us. And sometimes in our lives, we go down into like a meltdown, and all the structures tend to just kind of get shaky and collapse all at the same time, and things feel really uncertain and unfamiliar at best, and just downright terrifying at worst, right? And often in those situations, we start to reach out to have meaningful conversations. And if you happen to be this open and understanding person, your phone is the one that's going to ring, right? because people around you need conversation when this phase of their lives starts to happen. Sometimes you don't hear from them at all when they're building things and when they're coasting and thriving. But when things start to crumble and shake, the phone starts to ring. And this happens to me frequently, as you can imagine. It's what I do. It actually happened last Sunday. I was sitting by the pool after my delightful time with all of you last Sunday, talking. A good friend of mine from Atlanta called. And I haven't talked to her in the 2 years or whatever since I've been away. And I smiled when I saw her number kind of pop up in my phone, and I happily answered. And as I said, we haven't spoken. And her first question, not even hello, was, "Where do you live?" that was it. We were off on our conversation. And she went on to explain that both of her parents have died in the past couple of years. She realized that all of her immediate family had moved away from Atlanta, and she was living there kind of on her own as far as family was concerned. And I could tell the way she was talking about it, she was in a place where she was less than enchanted with the ashram that she was attending. And just friends had kind of begun to drift away, and the structures of her life were changing. And she had lost her sense of connection and community. She was craving change, and she just needed someone to listen to her processing and hold a space for her to talk and get all that out. She needed to explore her beliefs about security and change and community and aging and starting over and all of those types of issues in her life. And I don't really know that I said that much in the conversation, but I listened. And I listened with this open heart as she poured out this sense of vulnerability and desire to create something new. It was a deeply satisfying talk for both of us. And the text I received afterwards were very affirming and loving, and she's still calling me. She called me yesterday again. But she'll be visiting at the end of June, and she plans to move to Fort Myers in July. She's ready to courageously change her life. But why are these conversations so satisfying? Like, what need do they fill? See, I believe that we're called into these types of conversations because of our call to oneness. You know, if we're practicing these two kinds of listening, this inner and outer, in another person's eyes, in another person's words and experiences, we can see ourselves, and we can see God itself leaning into the experience of being human. We can witness our own growth and transformation as it plays out in another person's thoughts and beliefs, and it challenges our own. And these conversations are a form of loving one another. Tell me more, tell me more. Tell me more about myself. Tell me more about God as you move through this experience. Tell me more. Tell me more. So what is possible for us spiritually in these types of conversations? Great and infinite healing is what is possible, because these types of conversations involve us opening to the creative power of the infinite within each of us. A first step to opening to that power is allowing ourselves to hear and be heard. So hence, we've got to create this inquisitive and open mind in them. Ernest Holmes says this: the individual is empowered by speaking clearly about whatever condition is happening. So whatever is happening, and through that, coming to the awareness and embodiment that all there really is God. The one practicing must be able to look a fact in the face and know that all manifestations are effects and can be changed by changing the mental cause. What he's saying is that as we stand in our spiritual true identity in a conversation, we can realize that everything that we are talking about, everything being discussed, is on a human plane. Every condition or every form is temporary and therefore must and will change. We can actually shift our experience of the circumstances or the issue by changing the mental cause, our thoughts or our beliefs about it. In other words, healing and improving our lives is possible as we move closer and closer and closer to divine truth. And we're always closer to the truth of a situation when we look at it from multiple perspectives. Until then, we only have our individual opinion, our own individual perspective. And those opinions were often formed very early in our lives, and they were often informed and influenced by someone else's opinions or fears. So here's a trick. Anytime the person you are speaking to about a topic is coming at that topic in fearlessness, pay attention. Because if you're sitting in fear and they're sitting in fearlessness about the same thing, listen. They're a teacher. They might have something to teach you or show you or invite you to consider, because we should always be moving toward fearlessness. And most often, we got to have somebody show us the way. We just will stay stuck in our fear, won't we? We are here in this lifetime to express our highest self into the world. Holmes says it this way: the universe exists for the expression of spirit. The universe exists for the expression of spirit, and man exists, women too, man exists for self-expression because he is the expression of spirit. That's what it's for. That's what we're here for. Fear and resistance is not our highest self. Meaningful and courageous conversations draw us out of our fear and resistance and moves us closer to our divine nature. The key work we have is to awaken to our divine nature, to awaken to the power that is born into us with our very breath. The key work is also to help others find it within themselves. When we listen to another, we empower them to seek a higher perspective for themselves and help us see it too. Here it is. A meaningful conversation opens the door to exploring what wants to happen here. What does Spirit want to express in this situation? And in the truth of interconnectedness of all of life, by revealing our own inherent divine nature, we reveal that same power and nature in those around us. We are the Centers for Spiritual Living. We do study and contemplate and talk, but we are not the Centers for Spiritual Study. We are not the Centers for Spiritual Talking About Things. We're here to live these principles. Our theme this year is spirituality in action. How can I be a sacred space of healing and inclusion in the days to come? How can I listen to others? And perhaps more importantly, how can I listen to myself and give myself the opportunity to be heard? The voice of the unheard is crying out all around us, often in the people that we're unfriending because we don't want to hear what they've got to say. Let us all strive to remember that everything is either love or a cry for love. And the most strident cries for love are generally the ones that seem the most unlovable to us. So I started this talk with an invitation for you to join the ministry. Let me repeat that invitation in closing. Join me in being a light in the world. Join me in being a loving presence in every conversation you are called into. Allow courageous and meaningful conversations to be a part of your daily walk through life. And make one of your catchphrases, tell me more. It's going to delight me when I hear you say it. Tell me more. Because as I listen with an open heart and soft eyes, I find truth has unexpected dwelling places. Until I remember that there's only one of us. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is whole and peaceful and loving and abundant and joyful. And that life is my life now. There is only love. And so it is.
And so it is.